Hi, I'm Daniel, and my partner is Britton, and this is the final project for Information Science 110, and we did our project on Instagram. Here we go. Brief history of Instagram. It began in San Francisco. It was created by Kevin Systrom and Mike Krieger, and the concept obviously came from the instant camera and a telegram. Instagram was launched in 2010, and it had 1 million users within the first 2 months. It was bought out by Facebook a short 2 years later for $1 billion. On this slide, we're going to go over the function and purpose of Instagram. And I'm sure most of you are familiar with this, considering there's 1 billion users throughout the world. But any time of the day, one can browse a news feed of Instagram. And in this news feed contains photos and comments that other users post and share. It's very easy. The interface is super user-friendly. You could find images of art, food, landscapes, inspirational or humorous memes, occasional nude content. Social networking with friends, family, celebrities, brands, athletes, complete strangers that have common interests. All that is really the meat and potatoes that what Instagram offers to its user. It's a platform for artists and musicians to share their work as well. Athletes, nutritionists, and a variety of hobbyists. They can all gather gain a following of users, which then obviously, as you'll see, is used to push products, branding, and of course, advertisements. Britton and I's focus on this project is not necessarily the hardware or technical side of Instagram. It's going to be more so the impacts that Instagram has had on our society in a couple different ways, either positive or negative. We'll discuss this and we'll go over some of this. But one thing I want to cover is the human factors, and in that is how much time does one person spend on Instagram? So I think the big thing that you're going to pull off this slide is that only about a quarter of the users are at an hour or less a day of use. So only 1 in every 4 people on Instagram use Instagram for less than an hour a day. A majority of the users are going to be spending 1 to 3 hours on Instagram. That surprised me. I feel like that's a long time to invest in scrolling and in seeing different pictures and different advertisements, and it just shows you the value that Instagram has for businesses who do want to advertise. And in that, I look at the 8.8% that spend more than 5 hours. Now, I just have a hunch, and I'm assuming, I don't have the research behind this like I should, but I'm assuming that 8.8% of users that are spending more than 5 hours, those are your businesses. Those are your people who are quote unquote Insta famous, the people who need to invest that time on Instagram, posting, sharing, commenting, and communicating with their followers in order to make money, because they're providing ad revenue and they're making money off ad revenue. So if you look at that, and 17.2% spend between 3 to 5 hours, it's considerable. It's almost a fifth. And then, like I said before, a quarter of the users spend an hour or less. Continuing with the human factors, we're going to discuss, and I'm sure everyone's familiar with this, as other social media platforms have this feature, but the likes or the heart on Instagram. Quick statistic, the like button is pressed 4.2 billion times per day. Okay, and anytime someone likes your photo, a heart icon is going to pop up. So immediately you're thinking of the psychological effects on users, right? Heart associated with love, you get more social media attention when this happens. It's a form of communication with your followers that's quick, easy, simple, and it's sort of it provides acceptance. It enhances the user's ego, which ultimately feeds into what I would think of when we were doing the research as the human's kind of addictive personality with social media and with Instagram itself. And this can also be used as a marketing tool to advertise business. Now, the amount of likes, where the likes came from, when the likes are happening, all that data can be combined and looked at and turned into information to better suit the business for their advertisement models. So this is something that you can tie in as a feature for Instagram, both with data and numbers, the psychological effects, And obviously, if you look at the 4.2 billion times, there's a certain amount of time associated with scrolling and liking, like the last slide said, with the billion users, and a quarter of them spend less than an hour. So that's another thing. You're starting to dive into the psychological side effects of the likes, the quick gratification. So yeah, the like feature, I believe, is a huge human factor on Instagram. A third human factor, and anyone that uses Instagram is going to know this is more specific to Instagram. As when it originally came out, this is what kind of connected everything, and connected a photo thread, and that's the hashtag. Now, the hashtag's used throughout all social media platforms. It's an ability to simply tag someone. And 83.6% of people use hashtags on Instagram. 71.9% of people using hashtags use them in captions versus comments. So they use it when they post a photo to caption a photo in order to categorize that photo rather than the comments. And then 59.3% of people will be following hashtags, right? They'll follow a certain photo thread about a certain subject. And oftentimes, like returning to advertisements where the monetary value comes, a business will have its own certain hashtag McDonald's, hashtag I'm loving it, whatever the case may be, in order to see things specific to McDonald's or whatever they decide to follow. As we start diving in a little deeper to the social impacts of Instagram, which is, like I said, the meat and potatoes of this presentation, of this project, the first topic is going to be the data analytics of the algorithms. You saw this during the class with the TED Talks, and where these algorithms can lead a society unbiasedly towards either good or bad. And then the second topic is, what is Instagram doing to photography? And I'd like you to think of photography more as in capturing history, right? It's one of our greatest tools at capturing what has happened, right? When you try to prove that something did happen and did exist, oftentimes, I got to see it to believe it, right? That's what you hear people say. Well, photography is part of that. You're seeing it. But with Instagram and filters and Photoshop and the ability to alter things using new technology, the photograph and even the video, because Instagram also allows video, is becoming less and less verifiable, right? And so we're going to look into these things. We're going to look at the social impacts of this. All right, so for the first main topic, we're going to talk about Instagram's use of its algorithms in order to, what they say, provide a better product for their users, right? But often when you dive deeper into this, it's providing a better way to create the human addiction to social media in order to have more time spent on the platform, which then equates to more time looking at ads, which then equates to more money and more products being sold. Of course, it's a consumer market, capitalist economy. You can go down a rabbit hole in that situation, right? So the algorithm itself, obviously, not many people can just explain exactly how this algorithm works. It's technology that's beyond, I believe, the scope of this class. However, it creates relationships amongst all the information that that Instagram is collecting, right? It characterizes each user. It finds out their interests in a timely manner, and other main factors of this algorithm. And this algorithm is basically deciding what it's going to put in front of you. Okay, what information, what posts, what users, what products should be put in front of you in order for you to potentially click on these things, buy these things, follow these people that are going to end up making you spend money, essentially. Okay, so the factors involved in that are your frequency of use, right? If you're not using too much, you're not necessarily giving up a lot of information for Instagram. But if you're using it a lot, it can learn your characteristics, your user personality, the amount of time, the session time. And then, of course, a huge factor, both from an algorithmic side and also, a sponsorship side, which also equates to more money, is your follower count. And that also feeds in the psychological side of the user, in their case, in the acceptance and ego and kind of alter life personality side of things. Who are you on Instagram and who are you in real life? That's always kind of a question, is does it line up? Does it not line up? Do you really look this happy? Right? There's so many things that go into this, but Instagram's main goal is to maximize the time the user spends on the platform. And like we've covered before, and like I've already said, it's in order to increase the amount of viewership that advertisements can have. Now that everyone understands the goal of the algorithms used by Instagram, right? Like I said, putting information in front of people that's going to keep them using that platform and potentially make them purchase items or view more ads. You look at the fact that these algorithms are unbiased, right? You have the moderators at Instagram who try to keep things getting out of hand as far as the content goes, stuff that's just, out of place, right? But with the freedom of speech, and Instagram has to remain unbiased, oftentimes things are presented in front of users that are scary. Viral misinformation, extremist memes, cyberbullying, and conspiracies. These are all things where even if a user comes along and is just curious, not even necessarily for these certain aspects of Instagram, but more or less just are curious about them, right? What's true, what's not true. Even if you look up, okay, what is fake news? Well, guess what? Fake news is going to be presented to you. Viral misinformation. And when one person dives into this, it affects millions of people, because the algorithms realize the characteristics of the users who are looking at this information and then tie you in, and it spreads like a disease. Extremist memes, right? Whether you're making fun of them and you're laughing or poking fun at them, and then it steers you into just like, a hatred for a certain group of people, i.e. a lot of times you look at terrorism and people associate it with Muslims. And so you'll be looking up what you think of as funny extremist memes, and this algorithm then puts in front of you information about what these extremists have done, and further provokes that user to then create hate for Muslims, because the two are tied together based on the algorithms, based on what the algorithms have discovered about the user, about what humans consider a thought line with Muslims, a thought line with terrorism. And then cyberbullying, right? That's huge today, because you can remain anonymous in a lot of situations, and therefore it kind of lets out the ugly side of things. But these algorithms will pull people and pull users both together, therefore are more powerful. Cyberbullying, they'll pull them together. You have a ton of bullies at once, and then you'll have conspiracy theories where, and most people, when they're looking up conspiracy theories, they get a little bit of a hint of, oh, that's kind of interesting. What happened there? Oh, is this real? And then the next thing you know, the algorithm catches on and realizes that, hey, if we present more of this type of information in front of you, it looks like you're gathering more and more interest, and therefore we'll put you down this rabbit hole. And the next thing you know, Instagram's algorithm has created an entire group, an entire followership of certain conspiracy theories and all of these can have extremely negative impacts on society. And what we're trying to get at, Britton and I are trying to get at, is that the algorithms themselves are unbiased. The algorithms don't know that this viral misinformation is bad. They just know that it spreads, and when people see it, they share it, and whether or not they believe it, right? So if it's believed and it's something that's, wow, this misinformation is crazy, what if it's true? And then it gets spread all over, and people start believing these things. What the extremist means, the cyberbullying, some people find a dark humor in that, the conspiracy theories, all the algorithms know is that it presents, when these things are presented in front of certain users with certain characteristics and personalities, it puts more ads in front of the users and it spreads. And that, I think, is the biggest factor in affecting our society, is that us as humans don't know how to necessarily decipher what is real, what is not. And it also entertains certain groups of human beings that aren't necessarily constructive and progressive for our society, like bullies and extremists, and in some cases conspiracy theorists. Now this brings us to the second main topic that Britton and I decided to discuss in our project, and that is how Instagram affects photography. And first we're going to cover the good, right? So Instagram is a photo-based social platform. So a good side of this is that 95 million photos can be shared a day amongst the billion users. So this encourages users to have a creative outlook because they have this opportunity to share with the world. So it promotes artist exposure, and oftentimes it can take an amateur photographer and promote their photos into what seems to look like the professional realm. Filters are easy ways to enhance the imagery, and the pleasing imagery captures attention, and the validation is sought after through these likes, and it can prove success. It can increase your self-esteem, your confidence. Obviously, if you're an artist and you put your work out in front of a billion people, and they find approval, and you find approval in that, that's going to help you, and the media attention grows your popularity, and you have the potential to be a trendsetter. Now, the idea that our phones have a pretty stellar camera, which nowadays it's unbelievable. I'm sure most of you watching this presentation have a phone with an unbelievable camera. It's a novel idea. It gives us access to taking these beautiful photos anytime we want without dragging out these giant lens, these DSLRs, this really expensive equipment. And it also opens up a world of opportunity to share this beauty instantly. So because it's on our phone, we can take the picture, edit the picture, share the picture, and comment on other pictures all in one application. It gives amateurs the ability to play around with a skill that previously had taken years to master. And I think the really good side of this is it also is a groundbreaking way for you to personally, as a user of Instagram, to personally discover amazing imagery. Right? You can discover artists that you appreciate and want to follow, art that you've never even considered being possible. So that's the good side of Instagram. Now that brings us to how Instagram affects photography in a bad way. And what is bad? What's bad is that we are losing the authenticity in all of our media. Can we tell what is real anymore? All the applications and filters added on top of photos creates a false imagery. Now, photographs are now being questioned, and which is good, which is a good side of things. We're getting smarter. We're kind of understanding that, hey, you can't take this at face value. But how will our children's children see us? Why did everyone put animal filters on their face? Why does nobody have any wrinkles? You look at Kylie Jenner's idolized, plasticized child body as a prime example of how damaging this could be for all our youth, right? The teeth whitening, the blemish correction, the muscle toning. These are unrealistic. And what this can do is this can negatively affect the self-esteem of users because there's this compare and despair amongst followers of a lot of these people that alter these images. And it can even go into certain products and businesses that aren't even a photo of a person, right? You get these off-brand products that look amazing and they look sturdy and strong, and then you get them and they're completely different size, and it's almost like false advertisement, right? And so that is the struggle when dealing with the technology that we have today, that can alter a photograph once it's taken, and it can trick the human eye and therefore trick the user. Now, to further continue with the bad side of Instagram in terms of photography, we're going to look at the fact that this is one example. There is a hashtag called hashtag no filter, which is a photo thread that's followed by people that post photos that supposedly don't have filters, excuse me. But ironically, filters were still used. Therefore, people lie. Instagram knows these things. This is data that they collect, and Instagram is using you in your lies. The pie chart on this illustrates which filters were used while claiming no filters were applied to the photo. This obviously points out to the fact that Instagram analyzes who says they have an authentic original photo, and when in reality, hashtag no filter is a lie. And Britain made this chart to represent that. And this brings us to the ugly side, right? Continuing with the bad, is that when you add in lying and the ability to hide behind things and the ability for the user to tweak a photo and get a different circumstance of attention from others that may not be realistic in real life, but it is on an application, they end up relying on this acceptance, and you end up having somewhat of a false self-esteem. Social media is said to be responsible for 1/3 of divorces because of the photos, the direct message flirting, infidelity in relationships, access to exes, easy access to exes, the inability to remove someone from your life that may be negatively affecting you. And once again, this confirms the compare and despair theory. People are always looking for something better, and people are competitive. And when you have a billion people sharing photos and trying to get attention, and you have basically a scoreboard with the use of likes and hearts and comments and popularity, people are only going to put the best images out there of themselves and not necessarily portray reality. And Instagram posting and following and seeking out attention can be addictive. Like I said, the human addiction to social media. And another important point to make with Instagram and photography is that the industry, the old school industry of photography, is becoming a lost art. Your 4x5 film photography with chemicals and processing is lost, which required a very thoughtful process because there's such a simple way to do it now, which can also be a positive. But when you look at the industry, the DSLRs and the camera industry and what that, and essentially the authentication of history through a lens, through being there and requiring this work and understanding it and communicating more with what's behind the lens, nobody needs to know what an f-stop is, aperture, exposure. They just click a button. And in the f-stop, in the exposure and the aperture, you understood what is required to create such beauty and the work that people put forth for that. And that's sort of the ugly side of it. Don't get me wrong, the photos on Instagram can be beautiful with just your smartphone and an applied filter. But there's a huge culture of people who think that tweaking a photo in a more manual way is a closer connection to art. And that's really what we're losing with Instagram. And as we kind of bring together the good and the bad with photography and the social impacts of the algorithms and the overall social impacts of Instagram, you can look at the behavioral impacts over the long term. And now Instagram photos posted might say more about you than you think. Now, people with a history of depression have been seen to post more often, and these photos are less filtered and typically darker in nature. So Harvard and the University of Vermont studied 43,000 photos consisting of 166 users that were diagnosed with chronic depression. Now, depressed users were more likely to post photos with more faces, a darker filter coloring, and use less words in their posts. So this study may serve as a blueprint for effective mental health screening in an increasingly digitized society. So, like we talked about in the class, and like we talked about earlier on the slide, this data can be then turned into information that can be useful. However, in this situation, the use can be used for red flags in seeing depressed behavior amongst users. And so the impacts long term seem to be negative. However, the data behind this can also be used beneficially. Now, Instagram has many contributing factors to worsening mental health. Now, these constant, oftentimes you'll find on Instagram the constant imagery of vacations and luxury, and that sets unrealistic expectations for anyone who desires or follows or looks to these users as mentors. And this goes along with, Britton and I's main topic of the downfall of the bad side of photography, where everything can be tweaked, right? So you have these girls presenting unrealistic expectations of what a female body should look like. And you have these guys with chiseled abs that are altered photos. And so it creates this body image depression and this necessity for people. They feel this necessity to use filters so that they can somehow look perfect, try to look perfect. And this creates this kind of cycle of, hey, we don't like the fact that photographs are being altered, but inside of us, we want to alter these photographs because it's the only real way that we can fit in and feel like we can compete with what we see on the application. And amongst other things, you're looking at sleep deprivation due to late night scrolling. It's this compare and despair theory that we've discussed. It increases the risk of depression, eating disorders, and isolation and disconnection from society because you are not finding that stimulation. Users are not finding the stimulation and the approval in reality that they're finding on this application. And so even if you do have 1 million followers and you do look beautiful on this application, oftentimes when you turn inward, in reality, you are not finding it around you. And that can cause harm for people and their mental health. Now, to look at or to conclude sort of the long-term social impacts in a nutshell, people are forgetting to live in the moment. How often do people enjoy each other without glancing at their phones? I know I'm guilty of it, and I look back on some of these moments and I go, wow, that's not the kind of behavior that I want to display for myself. So it creates a dull social engagement. I mean, how often do you see a group of people on their phones instead of engaging with each other? You oftentimes see sports events where the entire crowd has a phone out because they're wanting to record it and view it later, but they're also disengaged because they're focused on looking through a lens. And there's this identity crisis amongst users. People often disguise, edit, or manipulate who they are online versus who they are in real life. And then there's also drowning social confidence. People often add each other as friends upon meeting once. Now, would you hang out with them in real life? Why are people more confident on the internet? It's because they're behind a screen. When really, I believe a lot of this is covering up opportunities to, pursue in real life. And so you may be missing out on those. And looking at more long-term social impacts, you start looking at how Instagram can truly affect someone's behavior, physical behavior. Look at stalking, a non-healthy way to learn about people, right? As much as people put out on Instagram, oftentimes it can entice people to dig too far and like stalking, and also the bullying side of things, when you have people who are trolling, which is the most hurtful aspect of social media, and it involves hurtful words and ways basically people are out to upset others, and they get a reaction from users based off them trying to get upset, and it satisfies that user, that troll, and that's not the kind of human beings that most people want around. And so you lose real people, right? Being available for friends and socially participating in the real world activity is more memorable and meaningful than any Instagram message or post sent. Now, obviously, that's a consensus, but really, enjoying real life and real people is important, and you're losing some of that through Instagram. So to finalize this project, Britton and I's project, we conclude that Instagram has a negative impact on the growth of society. However, I think as we educate ourselves on how Instagram works, and we look at the studies and we research and we understand how it can affect us, we can overcome that and pull the positives away from what Instagram can actually do for us. I think it's a valuable tool, but I also think it's dangerous. And the more you're aware, the more you can train yourself and make others aware about the negative impacts and how to avoid them. And this concludes our project, and I really appreciate the time you took to view this presentation. Britton and I are very thankful.